Hey there, this is Avdi Grim. Lately, I've been using the tool VCR for my Rails testing a lot, and I love it so much that I decided I had to record a screencast about it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it does, how to use it, and well, how I've been using it, because I'm still kind of figuring out how to best use it. So VCR, um, first of all, what is it? Um, let's talk about testing web apps. A modern web application is more often than not is an interconnected application. So it doesn't just stand alone. Usually you're talking to at least one other API, typically some kind of RESTful API. And in a lot of apps these days, you're talking to multiple third-party APIs. You know, whether it's talking to social networking services or talking to your mail delivery subsystem, or getting URLs shortened or interacting with a payment gateway. There are all these different reasons that you're going to be interacting with various third-party web APIs, and this presents an interesting problem when it comes to testing, specifically when it comes to sort of high-level integration testing, where you want to make sure that the whole app works as expected, complete with all of its external interactions. There are a few different approaches that you can take to testing at this level. So you can do just live testing, where you have the application actually talk to those external services um, during the tests. And some of the problems with this approach are, I mean, number one, it's typically very slow. You can have tests that take many minutes to complete because they're constantly making these calls to external services, and that makes continuous integration kind of a pain. Um, Also, your tests are now dependent on an external service's runtime. So if you're running continuous integration, your tests could just randomly fail one day because one of the services that they depend on has gone down for a little while, is undergoing maintenance or something. And finally, you may find that if you're running your tests a lot, you run into usage limits. Like, services like Twitter have API limits where you can't call them more than n number of times per minute or per hour or whatever. And if you're constantly running your tests, hundreds of test cases, you can easily run into that, and suddenly you can't run your tests at all. So that's a problematic approach. Another possibility is that you just is that you sort of put facades on all of your usages of the API, and then when you're testing them, you replace them with really simple internal stubs or mocks, mock objects. And the problem with this approach, it's very fast and it's reliable, but the problem with this approach is that you're really not integration testing anymore. I mean, you don't get any confidence when you test that way. You don't get any confidence that you're actually going to be working against the real services. All you know is that your own code is working. So another approach that I've taken in the past is to actually build fake versions of the external services. So, like, I'll put together a little Sinatra app that behaves like a highly simplified version of the Twitter API or some other API, and this can work. I've used this on projects, but the problem there is that you wind up putting sometimes it seems like you put up just as much time into maintaining your little fake applications as you do building your real application. Just building these little fakes to behave like some external service. A final approach that you can take is to use libraries like FakeWeb or WebMock, which basically stub out all of the Ruby HTTP calls and replace them with fake calls, and then you just put in, this is basically another form of stubbing and mocking, where you're actually faking the HTTP responses for any of these external calls. And again, with this, you run into the issue of maintenance, because you effectively have to, to do realistic tests, you effectively have to build internal versions of those external services that behave like the external services, so that if you post something to them, then they'll be able to act as if they're the external service having received that item that you posted. And so you have a lot of maintenance headache again. So I've done all of these approaches, and been not really been happy with any of them, as I've built more and more interconnected applications. VCR is a new approach to testing against external APIs. The way it works is, you write your specs, Cucumber specs, or whatever kind of specs you're writing, whatever tests you're writing. You write those as if they're going to actually hit the live server, so you don't stub anything out or mock anything out. And you're actually going to hit the live servers. But then VCR sort of steps in as a middleman and records every interaction that you do with an external service. It records the HTTP request, and it records the response, and it records those in the form of YAML files. And then when you run the tests again, you can replay them. It automatically replays those interactions. So to the application, it appears as if it's hitting the external service. But what's actually happening is that VCR is matching the requests against interactions that it's already recorded, and returning the corresponding HTTP response. So it's very fast, and it's no longer connected to the external, or dependent on the external services. But the interactions are they're perfectly accurate to how those external services actually behave, because they've been recorded from real interactions. And then it gives you the ability to do things like tweak those recordings, if they're if you need to tweak them a little bit to make your tests work. And then periodically, what you can do is blow away all your recordings, rerun the tests against the live services, and that way you can refresh the recordings and check yourself against the services, make sure that nothing's changed, and that you're still interacting with them correctly. So I have a little web app that I'm working on, and what I want to do is I'm gonna add VCR to this application so that I can start using that in my tests. The API that I'm building against right now is the Google spreadsheet API. And what I need to do, first of all, I need for this app to be able to authenticate against the Google APIs. And so that's an external call, which I would like to record with VCR. So let's get started. The first step here is going to be requiring the VCR gem in our gem file. And just for your information, this is a Rails 3 application. So I'm going to go into this section that I already have here. I have a section in my gem file for stuff that I only want in development and test mode. Why do I want this in development mode as well as test? Well, I'll get into that in a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to require VCR. I'm going to require a specific version. I happen to know that 1.8.0 is the current version right now. Alright, so now it's required. Now what I need to do is to actually use it. First thing I'm going to do after requiring the gem is I'm going to do a little bit of configuration. I'm going to go to the test environment configuration. And I'm going to start a VCR config block. So I'm going to say VCR.config do. So this is very similar to the to how Rails does its configuration blocks. And first I'm going to tell it where to store its recordings. VCR refers to its recordings as cassettes. And if you want to feel old, just reflect upon the fact that in a few more years, developers watching this are going to be scratching their heads and saying, "What the heck is a VCR cassette?" All right, so I'm going to tell it to put its cassettes in the VCR cassettes directory underneath Rails root. Next, I'm going to tell it how to do its stubs. So what VCR does, it integrates with a bunch of HTTP stubbing libraries. So when it's stepping in between your requests and the external services, what it's actually doing is it's using libraries like FakeWeb or WebMock to actually implement that. I am going to stub with Typhoeus. Actually, stub with, because I'm using the Typhoeus HTTP library in this application. All right, next thing I'm going to say is allow HTTP connections when no cassette equals false. So this is going to keep me honest. What this does is it sets things up so that HTTP connections can only be made through VCR. They can't be made outside of VCR. So this way, I have to set things up so that I'm recording the interactions. Otherwise, HTTP requests will result in exceptions. And finally, I'm going to supply a default cassette options block. And this lets me set up the default options for recording cassettes. And what I'm going to say here is record once. And what that tells VCR to do is that basically when it's recording a new cassette name, it's going to check to see if that cassette exists. If it does, it's just going to play it back. It's gonna look for interactions in there and play them back. If the cassette doesn't exist, what it's going to do is it's going to record it. So it's going to go against the live service and then record whatever it gets back from the live service. All right, so there's my configuration. Now, I could use VCR directly in my Cucumber steps, but what I actually like to do, I actually like to put a little bit of a sort of a sugar around it, a little bit of a helper around it. So I'm going to go into my feature step help or feature support directory, and I'm going to create a new file called VCR. And I'm going to create a VCR helpers module here. And I'm going to start putting some methods in here that I find useful for interacting with VCR from inside of Cucumber steps. First thing I'm going to do is this little handy helper method I'm going to call Slugify. and this may seem kind of unrelated to VCR, but one of the things that I find it useful to have is a simple way of creating nice file names from arbitrary strings. This helps with setting up the cassettes. So bear with me for a second. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just make a little method here which will turn arbitrary strings into file name friendly strings. So I'm going to say strings.map for a given string. First of all, strip any white space off of the beginning and the end. Convert it to all lowercase. And then I want to take any runs of characters which are not A to Z, 0 to 9, or underscore, and I want to convert those runs of characters into a single underscore character. And now that I've got all that, I'm going to take these slugified strings and I'm going to join them all together with underscores. And just in case that creates strings with multiple underscores strung together, I'm going to go ahead and squeeze the underscores again. Alright, so now I've got a handy little helper method, and now I'm going to create a method called using VCR cassette as kind of a little abstraction over the VCR calls. So it's going to take an array of path segments, and it's going to receive a block. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to add an extra path segment to the beginning. So what I'm constructing the path to the recording here. And since these are, we've already established that the top level directory for recordings is the VCR cassettes directory, but I want to make sure that when I'm recording for the purpose of features, of Cucumber features, that all those recordings go into a subdirectory called features. So I'm going to say path segments dot unshift features. Now I'm going to convert that array of path segments into a full path. Say path segments dot map for each segment. Slugify the segment. See, now we're using that method that we just defined a little earlier, and we're going to join those together with slashes to make a valid path. Finally, now I get to actually calling into VCR. We're going to say VCR.useCassette, and we're going to pass it the name, and we're going to pass the block down into it. Now this gives us some helpers, but I need to remember to actually make them available inside the Cucumber specs. So then I need to say world VCR helpers, and that'll include them in the steps. So we've got this feature, sign in for the first time, and it's pretty simple. We're entering some data, and we're assuming that the app is going to prompt us to log in, and then at that point, we're going to grant access to Google Sheet, and then we should see ourselves logged in. So let's take a look at the definition of this step here. When I grant access to Google Sheet, So it's going to basically it's going to look for a it's going to look for the link to sign in with Google. And it's going to simulate the process of clicking on that link, getting authorization from Google, and then what Google will do once the user authorizes is it's going to redirect back to this application provided callback URL, and it's going to provide a token to that callback. So here's where we simulate that. We say visit callback URL, and then inside that callback handler, this is what it looks like. You can see what it's doing is it's making a request back to Google to verify that to basically to upgrade that token to a permanent token. And so it's using TypeOAS to do a GET request. And that's what we want to record. So we have this helper now. So I'm going to say using VCR cassette, and I'm just going to call it grant access. And remember, the way we wrote this, it's going to result in a cassette name like this. It's going to be VCR cassettes / features, and then the slugified version of that string. So it's going to be /features / grant _ access, and then then VCR is going to tack a YML on the end. So that's going to be the final path of our recording. So let's try and run this. Looks like we've got a failure. Well, it looks like it didn't log us in successfully. Let's see if we got a recording though. Well, it looks like there's a VCR cassettes directory now. So that wasn't there before. Now I'm gonna drop down into that directory. And look, there's our features directory. Good so far. Let's check in there. Oh, look at that. Grant access.yml. So there's our recording. And as you can see, this is just an ordinary YAML file. And it starts, each entry in the file is an HTTP interaction object. And the interaction contains a request and a response. Here's the request. We did a GET, and we did it against this Google auth subsession token address. With this faked up token that the test uses, and lo and behold, when we hit that URL with a faked up token, we get an invalid auth sub token response. Who'da thunk? So so we have kind of a problem here, because we want to get a we want to record this interaction, and so we can then play back these tests locally, nice and fast. But this is one of those interactions. This is one of those interactions with an external API that also requires some user interaction. So it's not just pure RESTful calls. An important part of this whole process is that the user has to be presented with the Google login screen and click the they might have to log in first, and then they're going to have to hit the grant button, and then that's going to redirect back to the application. But obviously, it's a little difficult to automate that kind of user interaction with an external service in a test. So what to do? Well, I thought about this for a while, and I realized, we have this way of recording arbitrary HTTP interactions. And there's really no reason that we have to only do that in the tests. We could also do that in development mode, and then we could take the recordings, maybe munge them up a little bit, and reuse them in tests. So that's what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do next, what I'm going to walk you through, is creating a very simple way to record live use of the application using VCR. Basically, record all of the API interactions that it does in the background as you use it, as you just use the application. So the first step is we need to configure the application to run with VCR enabled in development mode. So I'm going to go back to the configuration, environments, test, and I'm going to grab this section, and then I'm going to jump over into the development.rb, the development environment, and paste that in, and then I'm going to just modify it just a tad. So let's see. We still want to put the cassettes in VCR cassettes. Allow HTTP connections when no cassette. We'll leave that on false. But I'm going to switch the record mode over to all. So rather than recording once and then just playing back if the cassette exists, now it's just going to always hit the live servers, and it's just going to record every single interaction with the live servers without playing anything back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at the very beginning, I want to insert a default cassette, and basically I want to give us the opportunity to configure this with an environment variable. So I'm going to use the environment. I'm going to say fetch environment.fetch VCR cassette. But if there's no configuration in the environment, then we'll just use one called simply development. Now we need to do this. We need to provide a cassette right from the start, because I've configured it so that it doesn't allow any HTTP connections if there's no cassette present. And I'm also going to, since we've got this. Oh, I screwed this up. This isn't just VCR insert. It's VCR insert cassette. There we go. All right, so since we've got an insert, we need a matching eject. And to do that, I'm going to put in an add-exit block. This will be executed when the program exits. And I'm going to say VCR.eject cassette. All right, so far so good. But I'm not done. This gives us something rudimentary, but I want something a little bit nicer. I want to actually have a way of starting new recordings and stopping them while the application is running. So I'm going to create a very basic controller for controlling the VCR recording. I'm going to call it VCR controller. For some reason I can't type. Standard Rails controller, descended from application controller. We're going to give it an index where we can list all the cassettes. I'm going to give it an insert action and eject action. The insert action is going to insert a new VCR cassette. So we'll say cassette equals VCR dot insert cassette, and we need a cassette name. So where are we going to get our cassette name? Well, let's say that we're going to put these under a, by default, we're going to put these under a development directory in our VCR cassettes directory. So we'll say cassette name equals file.join. There's our top level directory, and then we'll say param sub cassette sub name. And once we've inserted it, we're going to let the user know that a new cassette has been inserted. So we're going to say we're going to flash the notice. And then we're going to redirect back to the index. Alright, so this is the eject action is going to be similar, a little bit simpler though. We can just say cassette equals VCR.eject cassette. VCR uses a stack of cassettes, so you're basically just, when you insert a cassette, you're pushing onto the stack. When you eject, you're popping off of the stack. Once again, we're going to flash a notice. And then we're going to redirect back to the index. Whoops. Action goes to index. Alright, well, none of this is any good without a UI, so we need a new view. We're going to go to Views, VCR, Index. Now, I'm using the Erector view system for this application. I went over that a little bit in an earlier screencast. So this view file is just another Ruby class. So to create a new Erector view, I'm going to say class views VCR index corresponding to the directory that we're in. Descends from, I've got a layout called page. And content is our is where we put our main content. First of all, I'm going to make sure we have our flash rendered. That's something that's provided in the main page layout. And give us a title here, VCR cassettes. The first thing I want to do here is I want to just display what the current cassette being recorded is. So I'm going to say, I'm just output the current cassette name. And I got to give it its own class in case I want to style it later. And you know, we've been writing a whole lot of code without really seeing what it does. So let's just briefly turn on the application and make sure that we haven't made any glaring mistakes yet, and that we're actually getting somewhere. And you know, I realized that one thing I'm going to have to do before we actually use this new controller is we're going to need some routes for it. So, go over to my route file. And we know that we only want this to be available in development mode. We definitely don't want any access to this in the production mode. So we're going to say if rails.env.development, whoops, get a question mark on the end there, then we're going to match VCR insert to the insert action, but only if it's a post. We're going to match VCR eject again only if it's a post, and we're going to match VCR index. So let's see here. Do we have a VCR controller? Oh, look at that. So I've gone to the /VCR path, which we just put the routes in for, and I can see here's the view that I just created, and it says current cassette is development. And if you remember, in the configuration, our default cassette name is development. So that looks like that's all working well. Now let's put in the controls for actually changing cassettes. So back to our index template. I'm going to first of all give us the ability to eject the current cassette. So I'm going to create a button 2. That'll create a button which will post to our to the action that we give it. So button 2, we're going to call it eject cassette. And the URL is the VCR eject path. Now we need a little form for putting a new cassette in. So form for cassette. URL is the VCR insert path. And we'll put a label in to label the field. Put the actual text field in for the name of the cassette that we're putting in. And finally we'll put a submit tag and that's it for our view. Let's take a look at let's take a look at how that looks. Refresh this. All right. So we've got an eject cassette button now. We've got a cassette name button. So I'm going to insert a new cassette called authorization. I want to record the authorization process. So I'm going to give that a name. I'm going to say insert cassette. Says inserted cassette development / authorization. And now that's reflected in the current cassette field. So that all looks good. And now I'm going to go back to the application home page and put some data in. Submit. It says you are not signed in and offers me the ability to sign in with Google. There's the Google sign-in page. I'm going to choose my test account. Hit continue. I'm going to say grant access, and I'm redirected back to the index page. So I'm going to go back to my VCR controller now, and I'm going to say eject cassette because VCR. One thing you have to understand about it is that it only records. It only actually writes the recording when the cassette is ejected. So we need to go ahead and eject that. And nothing happened. All right, I had to go and fix something there, but it looks like now it's working. The cassette ejected. Let's see if we actually got a recording. So back at our home directory, we've got our VCR cassettes. Directory. And uh-oh, looks like we might not have gotten a recording. So it turns out I actually messed up something in the view here, in the index view. This shouldn't be URL goes to VCR eject path. It should just be VCR eject path. And now the eject button should work a little bit better. So let's reload our VCR page, eject cassette. All right, we've ejected the cassette development / authorization. Now we're back to the default cassette in our stack. Now if I check the VCR cassette directory, cross your fingers. Aha! Now there's a new subdirectory in there called development, and here's authorization.yml. So here's another interaction recording, except in this case, instead of getting a rejection from Google, we've got the successful authorization that we recorded live. So this is good. What we can do now is we can just grab this. I'm just going to grab the entire recording, and I'm going to go into that feature that we recorded before, the grant access recording, and I'm just going to replace it. I'm going to replace that recording with the successful one that we just recorded live using real user interaction. And I'm going to go back to the feature file. And I'm going to try to run this again. And we're still not passing. Now, here's another area where VCR can really come in handy. I paused the recording for a second there, and then I took a look around, and I realized the reason, I believe the reason that it's not passing is I'm actually not pulling the right information out of the Google callback, and I can see. So what you can see in the in my callback handler is that I'm trying to pull a token out of the headers, and as well as an expiration out of the headers. And when I actually look at and I think I got that from an example from Google's website, but when I actually look at the result that comes back from that call that VCR has conveniently recorded for me and put in this nice YAML format, I can see that both of those are wrong, because actually what happens here is we get an expires header, not an expiration header, and we get the token is in the body. It's just in a string in the body. This is a plain text reply. So I actually need to update my Google callback handler to account for that. And I'm back. So I stopped recording, and I checked on a couple of things. It turned out I'd messed up a few things. I had completely forgotten. I'd thrown away the part of the view that showed the currently logged in user. So that would have been kind of helpful for passing this test. So I brought that code back. I'm not going to walk you through that. It's not that interesting, but it's there again. And I had to make a couple more tweaks, and I'll step you through some of them. First of all, things now that I'm showing the currently logged in user, I had to change one of my step definitions to another of the step definitions to use a cassette. So I have this step when I enter 25 sit-ups, which enters some data into the main data entry field and hits submit. And now that I'm showing user information, that can actually trigger an API call to Google. And so since we're disallowing any HTTP connections without a cassette, I had to surround that with a cassette. And this is good because it gives me an opportunity to show one part of my technique here. The text that goes in this using VCR cassette argument can be anything, and in this case I'm actually interpolating in the text that I specify in the when I enter 25 push-ups. So that's going to be the cassette name for this is going to be enter 25 push-ups, and you can actually see that. You can see that there's now a VCR cassette features. Maybe there isn't. Let's see here. Okay, there actually isn't a recording for that step, and I'm actually not entirely sure why. But the point is, being able to interpolate text into the arbitrary text into the cassette name like this gives you the ability to very easily record new cassettes for different different variations on the same cucumber step. So it would record a different, if any actual API calls were made, it would record a different recording for, say, 25 push-ups versus 30 push-ups. That may or may not be what you want. Another thing I had to do was I had to change the using VCR cassette call to accept options. And in this case, what I'm doing is I'm overriding the default to say record new episodes instead of record once. And what that tells VCR is instead of in record once mode, it'll look to see if the cassette file exists, and if it does, it won't record any new interactions. It'll limit the HTTP interactions to the ones that have already been recorded in the file, and if you try to do something that hasn't been recorded in the file, it'll raise an exception. With new episodes mode, if you already have a recording, you already have a cassette, but you make an API call that isn't recorded in that cassette, it'll actually add that call to the recordings in that cassette. So it'll add something to the end of that cassette and then save it again. So I've done that, and I've actually already run these features again. And what you can see now is that in my grant access cassette, here's the stuff that I recorded manually and then pasted in. So there's the successful token response right here. And then because it was in new episodes mode, it was able to add this second interaction onto the end, which is where it's actually going and fetching the user information from Google. So now that I've got all that in place, I guess I should probably show you just real quickly the new using VCR cassette helper. So that just looks like this. The only thing that's changed is that we're popping off the options hash if it exists, and then we're passing that options hash to the VCR use cassette call. So with all that in place, I can run that scenario all the way through, and it passes, and I could have done that. I could have turned off my network connection completely and run that, and it would have passed, because all of those Google API interactions are now recorded. I can play them back quickly anytime I want without worrying about actually hitting the Google API. And if I ever want to refresh that and ever want to make sure that it's still up to date, that there haven't been any API changes that I don't know about, I can just delete those YAML files or move them off somewhere and re-record and verify that the test pass again. All right, well, I know that was kind of long and rambling, but hopefully you got something cool out of that. Hopefully you have an idea of how to use VCR to make your cucumber scenarios that interact with external APIs faster and more robust. And that's about it. Check me out, avdi.org, avdi on Twitter if you want to make any comments. And hopefully you'll be seeing more screencasts from me soon.